There's a certain kind of silence that doesn't come from peace. Comes from absence. From the sound of someone not being there anymore. Janet used to wake up to the sound of a man humming in the kitchen. Now, it's just the click of the coffee machine and the faint groan of old floorboards under her own feet. The bed beside her hasn't been slept in for years. Not really. She's 58. Sharp mind. Graceful smile. Still turns heads when she walks into a room, though she rarely notices. People say she's lucky. Independent. Elegant. Strong. But being strong isn't always a choice. Sometimes it's what's left when the other options run out. One night, in her perfectly tidy kitchen, she stared at her phone. The screen lit up with a message. Try online dating. You deserve love too. That one sentence changed everything. She didn't know that behind those smiling profile pictures, there would be lies wrapped in charm. That some men would say just enough to keep her hoping. That others would disappear the moment they got what they came for. Or that desire, even at this age, could still make your heart race, and still leave you wrecked. Janet thought she was too smart to fall for games. She wasn't. She thought being mature would protect her from heartbreak. It didn't. And she thought just maybe someone out there would actually want to build something real. She was wrong, until she wasn't. Because something did happen. Something strange. Something that made her question everything she thought she knew about love, men, and herself. There was one man who said all the right things. Who knew just how to look at her. Who kissed her like no one had in decades. And who vanished like a ghost, with a secret she would only discover much, much later. She never saw it coming. And when she found out, it wasn't just betrayal. It was a wake-up call. This isn't a story about being naive. It's a story about being human. About learning, even when you're old enough to know better. And it's about the shift that changed everything for her and maybe for you too. If you've ever stared at your phone, waiting for someone who never texts back. If you've ever dressed up, hoping this time would be different. If you've ever made yourself smaller just to feel wanted. Then Janet's story is yours too. Just wait until you hear what really happened. She didn't sleep the night it all began. It wasn't insomnia. Not the kind that keeps you up thinking about bills or your bad knee. This was something deeper. Something in her chest had cracked open, and suddenly the air in her bedroom felt thinner. Like she was breathing through regret. Janet lay in bed staring at the ceiling, wondering how she got here. She wasn't lonely in the traditional sense. She had friends. A garden. Her Wednesday book club. She even volunteered at the library twice a week. But somewhere between baking banana bread and clipping dead roses, she started to notice something. She hadn't been touched in years. Not a casual touch. Plenty of people hugged her. But that intimate kind. The way a hand lingers a second too long on your lower back. The brush of fingertips on your wrist when you hand someone a glass of wine. That look that says, I see you. And I want you. It had been so long since someone looked at her that way. She was starting to forget what it felt like. So when she opened that app just to browse, just to see what was out there, it felt harmless. Like walking past the perfume counter and catching a scent that reminds you of someone you used to love. The first few days were fun. Light. Men swiped. She swiped back. There were cheesy pickup lines, compliments about her smile, photos of men with fishing poles and motorcycles, and way too many sunglasses selfies. Some were charming. Some were weird. A few were clearly lying about their age. And then came Jason. He didn't look like the others. No shirtless mirror selfies. No looking for a woman who knows how to treat a real man in his bio. Just a soft smile, clean eyes, and a one-sentence intro. Starting over and hoping it leads somewhere honest. That got her. They started chatting the next day. He asked questions, not just flirty nonsense but real ones. What kind of music she listened to. How long it had been since her last relationship. Whether she believed in fate. No one had asked her something like that in years. He told her about his divorce. About how he'd spent too long pretending to be someone he wasn't. Just to keep a woman who stopped loving him 5 years before she left. He said he was tired of pretending. Janet found herself typing more than she intended. Sharing little bits of herself she hadn't said out loud in years. The miscarriage in '94. Her fear of becoming invisible. That night her husband forgot her birthday and she cried in the garage, pretending to look for a flashlight. Jason didn't run away. He listened. Or at least he said he did. After a week of chatting, he asked to meet. Coffee somewhere public. Just casual. He showed up 10 minutes early, bought her latte before she arrived, opened the door for her, and when she sat down, he looked at her the way she hadn't been looked at in decades, like she was the most interesting page in a book he didn't want to put down. Their conversation flowed. He made her laugh. Not the polite kind, but the real kind, the kind that crinkles your nose and makes you forget how long it's been since you last let yourself go like that. When he walked her to her car, he didn't try to kiss her. Just smiled, touched her elbow gently and said, "I'd like to see you again, if you're open to that." She was. The second date was dinner. Italian. He remembered she didn't like red onions, and when her pasta arrived with some on top, he flagged the waiter before she could even say a word. He made her feel seen. Not just looked at, but really seen. The third date he kissed her. Not rushed. Not hungry. Just slow, deliberate, confident. She hadn't been kissed like that since her 30s. Her whole body responded. Skin tightening, breath catching. She forgot what it was like to want something so badly and actually have it in front of you. By the fourth date, he was in her house. They drank wine. She lit candles, turned on Coltrane. He took his time, every move careful, like he was learning her language one touch at a time. When he undressed her, he didn't flinch at the soft parts. Didn't look away from the stretch marks. He whispered, "You're beautiful." Not like a line, but like a revelation. Janet let him in every sense of the word. And for a while it felt like maybe, just maybe, she had found someone real. But then something shifted. Not loud. Not obvious. Just a silence where there used to be messages. A slight delay before he replied. A subtle change in tone, shorter texts, less warmth, fewer questions. She tried to ignore it at first. People get busy. Maybe he was going through something. Maybe he didn't want to seem too eager. But the gut doesn't lie. It was a Wednesday when she saw it. The app had a feature. Active now. She hadn't noticed it before. But there he was. Green dot. Online. She waited. No message. 5 minutes. 10. Still nothing. She tapped his profile. New pictures. One of them she didn't recognize. He'd taken it on her porch with the vines behind him when she'd asked him to help her water the plants. He'd uploaded it to attract someone else. She didn't cry. Not at first. She just stared at the screen. Then she did what she never thought she would. She messaged him bluntly. "Are you seeing someone else?" He read it. Didn't respond. And that was the response. Janet sat in the dark, phone in her lap, chest hollow. Not because she'd lost him, but because she'd given him a version of herself that had taken years to rebuild. And he'd walked away like it meant nothing. That night she made herself a promise. This wouldn't happen again. But it wasn't the last time it did. Not yet. Janet didn't delete the app. Not right away. Not even after Jason disappeared. There was a strange kind of shame that came with it. Not from the outside, no one else even knew. It was the shame of recognizing a version of yourself you thought you buried a long time ago. Desperate. Hopeful. Willing to believe in almost anything just to feel something again. She told herself she was fine. Told herself it had just been bad timing. That maybe he wasn't ready. That maybe she had scared him with her honesty. But deep down in that quiet part of herself she didn't speak to often, she knew. She had made herself available to someone who never earned it. She'd opened the door without checking if the person outside even knew how to knock. Still she stayed on the app. Because the ache didn't go away. Because even after all that, part of her still wanted what he had pretended to offer. The next few months were a blur of conversations. Tom from Denver, who sent shirtless pics after 2 messages. Rick with the Rolex watches and suspiciously vague business trips. Brian, sweet at first, who ghosted her right after she sent him a photo of her in that navy blue dress. The one she hadn't worn since her anniversary in 2003. She started recognizing the patterns. The way men would talk about chemistry before even meeting. The ones who said they weren't into labels or expectations at this stage in life. The ones who asked how adventurous she was before they asked what books she liked. Some were polite. Some weren't. But all of them had one thing in common. They weren't there for her. Not really. One man, Paul, seemed different at first. He was a retired history teacher. Widowed. Wrote long, thoughtful messages. told her he missed deep conversation, sent her photos of his garden, even mailed her a book, real mail with a handwritten note. She lit up every time she saw his name on her phone. Felt safe. Like maybe she finally found someone walking toward the same future she was hoping for. But the night before their second date, he canceled. His reason? I realized I'm not over my wife. She respected it. But it still stung. Because once again, she had given a part of herself to someone who wasn't ready to hold it. That night, sitting on the couch with her phone in her hand and a knot in her stomach, Janet finally broke. Not loudly, just quietly. A single tear ran down her cheek. Then another. Not just for Paul. Not even for Jason. But for the years she'd lost thinking this part of her life was over. For all the time she'd told herself to be patient. For all the nights she sat on that couch pretending a podcast was good company. And in that silence, a different kind of voice rose in her. Not a scream. Not even a whisper. Just a knowing. A sharp, clear understanding. This isn't about men anymore. This is about me. She stood up. Walked to the mirror. Looked at herself. Not in judgment, not in regret. Just looked. She saw the softness in her eyes. The strength in her jaw. The lines around her mouth, earned from decades of laughter and long nights and holding in things she should have said out loud. She wasn't broken. She was just misdirected. The next morning she deleted the app. But not because she was giving up. Because she was starting over. She opened her laptop and Googled, dating for women over 50 who want something real. It was something she'd never thought to search before. She had just followed what everyone else was doing. She figured Tinder and Bumble were modern, efficient, the norm. But now? Now she wasn't interested in efficiency. She was interested in alignment, in clarity, in peace. That's when she found Match.com. Not the flashiest site. Not full of people looking for quick flings. The layout was a little clunky, sure, but the questions were serious. Detailed profiles. You had to write about what you wanted and what you wouldn't accept. It was slower. More intentional. And something about that felt right. She signed up. Took her time filling out the answers. Wrote a profile that didn't beg or boast. She wrote things like, I'm not interested in fixing anyone. I'm not a nurse or a therapist or your mom. I want a partner who has done his work. Who knows how to listen. Who understands that real intimacy takes courage. And then this, please don't message me if you're bored. I'm not here for entertainment. I'm here for something real. If that scares you, keep scrolling. Felt powerful. For the first time, she wasn't just hoping someone would choose her. She was doing the choosing. And as she hit publish, she felt something shift. Not outside, but inside. Janet didn't know what would happen next. Didn't know if she'd meet anyone. Didn't care, really. Because for the first time in a long time, she wasn't searching from a place of lack. She was building from a place of knowing. And that changed everything. But old habits die hard. And just when she thought she'd learned the lesson, someone else appeared. Someone who would test every boundary she thought she'd rebuilt. His name was Victor. And he was nothing like the others. Not in looks. Though he was handsome in that polished, self-assured way that made you sit up straighter just reading his profile. But it wasn't the photo that made Janet pause. It was the message. He didn't start with, hey beautiful. Or you look amazing for your age. He wrote, you have the eyes of a woman who's walked through fire and made it look like a dance. She read it 3 times. Not because she didn't understand it, but because something in her chest tightened in recognition. Victor wasn't like the men who needed rescuing. He didn't talk about how lost he was, how broken he felt, how scared he was to try again. He spoke like a man who'd already done his battles and came back stronger. It was intoxicating. Their messages became pages. He was witty, sharp, thoughtful. He talked about philosophy, travel, wine. He didn't just flirt, he challenged. Asked what made her angry, what she regretted, what turned her on, not in the vulgar way, but with that low velvet tone that curled under your skin and made your breath catch. Janet told herself to be careful, to go slow. But with Victor, everything felt accelerated. Like she'd stepped onto a moving train and didn't want to jump off. They hadn't even met in person yet. And still, she found herself checking her phone every 10 minutes, reading back old messages, smiling to herself in the grocery store line. waking up early just to see if he'd written something while she was sleeping. He said all the right things. "You don't scare me, Janet. I've wanted a woman with a mind like yours for years. I'm not here to play games. I'm here to claim something real. You make me feel 17 and 60 at the same time." No one had ever said anything like that to her before. And when he finally suggested they meet, her hands trembled. He picked a wine bar. Upscale. Private. She wore that black blouse with the deep neckline. Something told her he would notice. And he did. When she walked in, his eyes scanned her slowly, not like prey but like art. He stood to greet her, and when he kissed her cheek, his hand lingered on her waist just long enough for her knees to go soft. Their conversation was magnetic. He leaned in close, listened like he was absorbing her, told stories that made her laugh and made her blush. She found herself confessing things she usually kept behind lock and key. He didn't flinch. When he walked her to her car, he didn't ask. He kissed her, and it was bold. Not rough, not hungry, just unapologetically confident. That night, Janet lay in bed fully clothed, heart pounding. It had been years since someone made her body remember it could still burn. The second date came fast. Then the third. And by the fourth, they didn't leave the house. They barely made it past the front door. His touch was different. Skilled. Intentional. Like he'd been studying her in his dreams. He asked her what she liked. But not sweetly, not like a boy seeking approval. Like a man expecting her to own it. And she did. That night, in the glow of candlelight and tangled sheets, Janet didn't feel 59. She didn't feel like a widow, or a woman who'd been ghosted. She felt electric, powerful, alive, and that terrified her. Because when you've been starving, even a drop of sweetness feels like love. The days that followed were a blur of passion and promises. He said he wanted more. Said he could see a future. Talked about trips they'd take. Cabins. Coastlines. Mornings with no clothes and too much coffee. Janet wanted to believe him. Every time he touched her, her doubts disappeared. But slowly the cracks began to show. Small things. A story that didn't match something he'd said before. A sudden missed call. A business trip that didn't come up until the day before. And then one night, after a dinner where he seemed distracted, she asked a simple question. "Are you seeing anyone else?" He didn't answer immediately. Just looked at her. Smirked. "I didn't think we were putting labels on this yet." And just like that, the illusion shattered. Janet froze. Not because he was dishonest, but because she'd known. Somewhere deep inside she'd known. She had just chosen to ignore it. He kissed her forehead. Said, "Don't overthink it. You're special. I just don't do control." She nodded. Smiled. And then she didn't call him again. He texted once. A week later. "Still thinking about you." She never replied. But that night, Janet sat on the porch in her robe, sipping tea with shaking hands, and asked herself the hardest question of all. Why do I keep giving myself to men who don't choose me completely? Not halfway. Not conditionally. Completely. She thought she had learned. She thought raising her standards would be enough. But Victor had slipped through not because her standards were low, but because she didn't fully believe she deserved more. Not yet. And that was the lesson she'd been avoiding. It wasn't about the apps. It wasn't about the men. It was about the space inside her where doubt still lived, quiet, seductive, and always ready to whisper, "This is as good as it gets." But she was done listening to that voice. And this time she wouldn't just delete an app. She would delete the version of herself that believed love had to be earned by proving she could survive being disappointed. There was no dramatic breakdown. No wine-soaked night. No girlfriend circling like hawks, urging her to delete numbers or post cryptic quotes about self-worth on Facebook. Janet didn't need a spectacle. She needed silence. She turned off her phone, took a long walk, let the air sting her skin and the sun remind her she was still here, still real, still beating. That night, she wrote herself a letter. Not a journal entry, not a to-do list. A letter, like she used to write when she was young and still believed in the power of paper and ink. "Dear Janet," it began, "you keep trying to be the right woman for the wrong man. And every time you do, you disappear a little. Stop shrinking. You were never meant to be digestible." She sat with that sentence for hours. And for the first time in years, she allowed herself to grieve. Not just the men who had left or lied, but the version of herself who had quietly accepted that attention was the same thing as affection. She wasn't broken. She was tired of negotiating her value. That week she made changes. She changed her bedroom, new sheets, new curtains. She cleared out the drawer of lingerie that hadn't been touched in 5 years. She unsubscribed from the mailing list that sent her flirty date night outfits for over 50. She even changed her coffee order. It wasn't about men anymore. It was about claiming space, her own space. About choosing things not because they were attractive but because they were aligned. And slowly things began to feel quieter. Not empty, just calm. It wasn't that she stopped wanting love, but she stopped chasing it with a leash. She let her Match.com account sit idle for a while. Didn't deactivate it. Didn't delete it. She just didn't perform for it. She went to the farmer's market alone. Tried a watercolor class. Took a weekend trip to Santa Fe and bought a turquoise ring that made her feel powerful and ancient and alive all at once. And then one night, when she wasn't looking for anything, she got a message. Short. No compliments. No pickup lines. Just, I liked your profile. I'm a widower too. I'm learning how to be with someone new without losing who I was with. His name was David. His photo wasn't polished. He wore glasses that sat slightly crooked on his nose and a corduroy jacket that looked too warm for spring. But his eyes looked like someone who'd lived through something and still chose to be kind. Janet didn't reply right away. She read the message again, then again, and something about it settled her. Not excited her, settled her. They began writing. Nothing fast. No flurry of flirty texts at midnight. Just slow, steady conversations. Books, grief, music. He played the cello. Had 2 grown daughters. Cooked risotto on Sundays. He wasn't flashy. Wasn't overly romantic. Didn't talk about chemistry or fireworks. He talked about compatibility. About peace. About partnership. Janet kept waiting for the moment he'd say something that made her flinch, or roll her eyes, or tighten her stomach the way Victor had. It never came. He didn't ask for photos. He didn't make her prove she was still desirable. He didn't need her to shrink or perform or seduce. He just showed up. Again and again. Their first call lasted over an hour. Their second nearly 2. And on the third, when she laughed at something he said and he whispered, "That sound, I've missed that sound." She felt it. Not a rush. A return. A remembering. They met 2 weeks later. At a quiet little bistro halfway between their towns. No grand entrance. No intense stare across the table. Just a warm smile and a hand on the small of her back as he helped her out of her coat. He told her she looked exactly like herself. And somehow, that felt more intimate than any compliment she'd ever been given. They talked for hours. He didn't try to impress. She didn't try to dazzle. They were just real. When he walked her to her car, he didn't try to kiss her. He asked if he could. She said yes. It was soft, unrushed, like they had time, because they did. The weeks that followed didn't feel like a whirlwind. They felt like home. He never made her doubt. Never played games. Never disappeared. He brought her soup when she had the flu. Listened when she talked about her late husband. Held her when she cried about her father's birthday. Told her she was beautiful, once simply while she was folding laundry in sweatpants. Janet didn't feel electric with him. She felt safe. And she realized something no one had told her. Real love after 50 doesn't feel like fireworks. Feels like permission. Like freedom. Like finally exhaling after decades of holding your breath. But even as she leaned into this new chapter, something unexpected stirred in her. A question. A quiet little whisper in the back of her mind. If I had to break so many times to finally be ready for this, then how many other women are still out there, waiting to realize they don't have to settle anymore? That thought wouldn't leave her. And one night, as David cooked and jazz played low in the background, Janet looked across the kitchen and said, "I think I need to tell my story." Janet had never thought of herself as someone who would write a book. Not because she didn't think she had something worth saying, but because she didn't believe people like her were meant to write books. Her world was full of other things. Family, work, friends, and the quiet satisfaction of a life well lived. But now, in this new season, she saw herself differently. The way she felt with David wasn't the revelation, it was everything that came before. The years of waiting for someone to finally give her what she needed. The men who had come and gone, leaving pieces of themselves behind that she had desperately tried to patch together. But now, with the clarity she had gained, the sense of peace she felt, she could finally see that those pieces had never belonged to her in the first place. What belonged to her now was the space she had taken back, the space she had stopped giving away in the hope that someone else could fill it. "I think I need to tell my story," she had said to David, as they sat at the kitchen table, a glass of wine resting between them. He looked up from his work, that soft smile on his face. "Tell your story," he repeated. "Not just to me," she clarified. "To others. To women who feel like they're running out of time, or that they've already made too many mistakes." "And what would that look like?" he asked gently. She thought for a moment. Maybe it looks like telling women they don't have to wait anymore. That they can stop letting someone else determine their worth. That they don't have to settle. David's eyes softened, and he reached across the table to take her hand. "Then I think it's a beautiful idea. And you're ready to do it." But Janet didn't just want to write for the sake of writing. She wanted to speak to those women who felt like she had. The ones who had settled for crumbs, or worse, believed they didn't deserve the whole meal. She began sharing her journey. First in small private forums for women in their 50s and 60s. The feedback was overwhelming. Women just like her had spent so many years believing that life, love, and happiness were only for the young, the perfect, the ones who had it all together. But that wasn't the truth. She was the proof. She could be proof for others. Each letter, each comment felt like a thread weaving them all together. She talked about the mistakes she had made. Staying too long in relationships that didn't serve her. Giving herself away too easily. Not knowing what her standards truly were. But she also spoke of the power of turning those mistakes into lessons, of how there could still be room for joy, passion, and love, even after 50. Especially after 50. And as she continued to share, she realized something. She wasn't the only one who had felt this way. Her words resonated because they came from a place of deep knowing. The vulnerability wasn't just a personal catharsis. It was a bridge. A way for others to feel seen, understood, and empowered to make choices that honored their needs. It wasn't long before she was asked to speak at a few local events, women's groups, book clubs, and even an online webinar for women navigating the world of dating after 50. Janet wasn't sure what she was doing at first. She wasn't an expert, wasn't a therapist. She was just a woman who had been through the storm and was now standing in the calm. But something about speaking, really speaking, made her feel like she was doing exactly what she was meant to do. David was there for all of it. He didn't need to be her cheerleader, he was just her presence. Always calm, always supportive. It was in one of those talks, while she was standing in front of a room full of eager faces, that she realized the depth of her own transformation. The version of herself who had once trembled at the thought of being alone in the world, had now become a beacon for others. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was thriving. And more importantly, she was teaching others to thrive too. After her last talk at a local bookstore, where she signed copies of the small ebook she had put together, Janet received a message that would change everything again. It came from an older woman, a complete stranger, who had heard Janet speak just that evening. Her message was simple, but it hit her like a wave. "I just wanted to thank you for giving me permission to love myself again. I've spent so many years trying to be the woman someone else needed me to be. But now I see I can be the woman I've always wanted to be. You've given me hope that it's not too late." Janet read the message twice, then closed her eyes. It wasn't a dramatic moment. There was no flood of emotions. Just a quiet sense of pride. This was why she had done it. She hadn't just found her way back to herself. She had helped others do the same. And in that moment she knew she was exactly where she was supposed to be. She didn't need to be anyone else. She didn't need to have all the answers. She just needed to keep being her. Authentically, unapologetically, and full of the love she had long ago learned to give to herself. The future was still unfolding, but now there were no more doubts. No more shoulds. No more waiting for someone else to fill the gaps. The gaps were hers to fill. And for the first time in her life, Janet felt completely whole. And as she looked out at the horizon with David by her side, She whispered to herself, "It's never too late to become the woman you were always meant to be." Janet's journey hadn't just been about finding love. It had been about rediscovering herself. In a world that often tells women their time is running out, Janet had learned that time was hers to control. It wasn't about waiting for someone else to validate her. It was about understanding that her own voice, her own choices, her own love for herself were the most important things she could give. And now, as she sat next to David, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and pink, she realized something else. She had found the kind of love that had always eluded her. Not the love from a partner, but the love that came from knowing her own worth. That, she understood now, was the foundation of everything. As she closed her eyes and let the wind blow through her hair, she felt ready. Ready to continue sharing her journey. Ready to give women like her the courage to take the next step, whatever that might be. Her story wasn't over. It was just beginning. And maybe, just maybe, her voice was exactly what someone needed to hear right now. Thank you for being part of this journey with me. If Janet's story has resonated with you in any way, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. What part of her journey stood out the most? Have you ever experienced something similar? Or are you currently navigating your own journey of self-discovery? Share your thoughts. I'd love to create a conversation around it. And hey, if you found this video helpful or inspiring, don't forget to hit that like button. It really helps to spread the word and lets me know you want more content like this. Before you go, I want to know from you, what would you like to hear about next? Are there topics you want me to dive deeper into, personal stories you want to hear, or questions you need answers to? Drop them in the comments or reach out. Your input is what keeps this channel going. Make sure to subscribe so you won't miss any future videos. There's so much more to come, and I can't wait to share it all with you. Trust me, you won't want to miss what's up next. Let's continue this journey together. Until then, remember, there's always time to reclaim your story.